Edward Elgar was the first great English composer since Henry Purcell, and almost 200 years elapsed between their births, causing Germans to often refer to England as the land without music. Elgar was born in 1857. He's a composer we often associate with his pomp and circumstance marches and all things imperial, yet he was anything but the quintessential Edwardian gentleman we often imagine. He was born in the provinces near Worcester in Gloucestershire, the son of a humble music shopkeeper. In a brutally class-conscious society, this made him an outsider. Worst of all, he was a Catholic in a fastidiously Episcopalian country. Elgar's rise to fame was slow. He was 42 when his variations on an original theme, which we often call the Enigma variations, catapulted him to international attention. By 1899, he had spent years teaching unpromising students and even conducting the band of the local lunatic asylum. Most astonishingly, and I think uniquely in music history, he was entirely self-taught in composition, studying scores as a boy at the back of his father's music shop. After the success of the Enigma variations, he was commissioned by the Birmingham Three Choirs Festival in 1900 to write an oratorio. Handel's influence on musical culture in England had been so great that the oratorio was seen as the most prestigious vehicle for musical composition. So it was a very big deal that Elgar was commissioned to write an oratorio for the Birmingham Festival. As I said, he was a Catholic, and a few years before he'd been married. At his wedding, the priest had given him a copy of a poem by Cardinal Newman. Now, to understand this, we've got to go back and do a little bit of history. The Oxford movement in the middle of the 19th century was a theological movement that sought to reincorporate some of the mystical and liturgical aspects of Catholicism that had been stripped from Episcopalianism during the Reformation. John Henry Newman was an Episcopal bishop and later converted to Catholicism and became a cardinal. He wrote a poem entitled The Dream of Gerontius, and it was this poem that Elgar was given at his wedding. The Dream of Gerontius is about a devout believer and his journey from death to his judgment by God and his descent to purgatory, where he will prepare and atone before entering heaven. Gerontius just means an old man, and in the poem he represents all of us. He's an everyman. Elgar's composition is in two parts. In part one, we meet Gerontius on his deathbed. His friends are standing around the bed praying. This is a drama of life and death. The prelude sets up a faltering mood in the orchestra, as if we can imagine the heartbeat of Gerontius as it ceases to pulse. We hear music from his life, from the church. We hear his friends singing a Kyrie, the beginning of the Mass. As he lies dying, Gerontius reminds himself of his faith. He's encouraged by the songs of those around his deathbed, and he steels himself for the journey ahead.
I went to sleep, and now I am refreshed.
By part two, Gerontius has moved into the afterlife, and the music begins with an utterly timeless sound in the strings. There's no pulse, no regular rhythm. Gerontius realizes that he's in a place where time has ceased to tick. Almost immediately, he meets his guardian angel, and she explains that she's going to guide him through this journey from earth, through caverns of demons, to the holiest place where he will see God for one brief moment and be judged. Elgar paints this astonishing journey in music of incredible psychological nuance. His orchestra acts much like that of Wagner's, using specific fragments of melody as memories of previous thoughts and fears. Gerontius travels through the terrifying chorus of demons who try to drag him down into hell, into the holiest place where choirs of angels sing, "Praise to the holiest in the heights, and in the depths be praise." Words that give me goosebumps as I imagine the amazing music that accompanies them. After a terrifying walk into the court of judgment, Gerontius sees God for one instant, at which point Elgar asks every instrument in the orchestra to play with the greatest possible force. This is a terrifying effect, and chastened by God's majesty and his own wretchedness, the archangel takes Gerontius down into the soothing waters of purgatory, where he will remain until his soul is purified for heaven. Gerontius is unlike anything else in music. It's not an opera, yet it features 3 soloists and a huge chorus. And it's so much more symphonic than other oratorios that it's not quite one of those either. The mysticism of the music, the shifting chromaticism of the harmony, which makes us feel unsteady and unsafe all the time, the heartfelt romanticism and the symphonic nature of its composition have drawn many, including Elgar's publisher and best friend August Jaeger, to compare it to Wagner's opera Parsifal. And there's much to say for that, although Elgar's statement is much more personal. So what does this all mean for us? It's a lot of theology which seems unfamiliar, but we identify with Gerontius immediately. We understand his fear of the unknown, his uncertainty, and his will to understand the meaning of his life and what might come next. All this despite the fact that we may not believe any of the theology behind the story. The music creates another world, far from the familiarity and tawdriness of earthly life. Elgar's orchestration is perhaps the greatest of any romantic composer, astonishing in its lushness and clarity, and from the first to last moment we are swept away by its seductive and terrifying strength. I think every musician has a composer with whom they especially identify. I don't mean Mozart, Beethoven or Haydn, these are the center of everything we do, but another composer who seems to speak our accent and to touch our innermost being. And for me, Elgar is that composer. No other romantic seems to be talking quite as directly. His music makes you want to be a better person, whilst reminding you that someone else has experienced every doubt, every joy, and every moment of nostalgia. And this is one of the greatest comforts that music can offer us. Of all Elgar's masterpieces, perhaps Gerontius is his greatest. This is music that makes the spirit soar, literally, while imparting a grave humility. Elgar felt this too, writing on the final page of the score an inscription from John Ruskin's Sesame and Lilies. "This is the best of me. For the rest, I ate and drank and slept and loved and hated like another. My life was as the vapor and is not. But this I saw and knew. This, if anything of mine, is worth your memory."